whatever it's going to take.
In progress in Lower Manhattan, the picture is a picture of the scene where two New York City firefighters, within the hour, were found alive in the debris. At least one of them walked out under his own power. Now, in the background is the president of the International Firefighters Union and Brotherhood, who is thanking those who are still working in the debris. And so let's pick up a little more of it live and hear what he has to say.
Is a man not only who has a heavy responsibility for all the firefighters in the United States and Canada in his role, the former president of Local 854 here in New York City, and a New York City firefighter and fire officer. This is a disastrous day for all of us, but for Vinny, I know this has been particularly a heavy heart in dealing with. I want to say, first of all, this nation should thank God for every firefighter in every community, because what they watched on Tuesday, the darkest day in the history of the greatest fire departments in the world, its darkest day, the most catastrophic, tragic incident in the history of the world's fire service, and again, this great city's fire department. It'll change every one of our lives forever. Our lives will never be the same. But we do have to deal with this. And I'm here on behalf of the 250,000 men and women of our great union to make sure that we're bringing in every resource that we can for our members. That's going to include to work in cooperation with this great fire department and city administration to assist them in any way we can. We've assembled some teams around the country for critical incident stress work that this department and our members are going to need. We're going to be pulling together our grief counselors from around the nation who have experience in this business of ours and understands the uniqueness of it, to be prepared to work with the families who are going to ultimately be dealing with a loss.
Well, you've been listening to the news conference and statements of leaders of the firefighters. New York City has the largest firefighting department in the country. It is believed well over 16,000 New York City firemen. As many as 300 plus may have died in the ruins and rubble of the World Trade Center. But the headline of the hour is that two New York City firefighters have been found alive in the debris. Byron Pitts is on the scene, and we go to him again. Byron?
Well, Dan, the number of firefighters who are standing on top of what remains of Tower Number 1, that number has increased dramatically. It appears from my vantage point there are probably close to 100 men standing on top of the remains. But the work is slowed down. I think there was some optimism after they came across that first firefighter and then the second, that they might find more people alive in that area. But the work there is slowed down.
Indeed,
the firefighters... Yes, Sam?
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, the firefighters that were brought out have been taken away from this scene. Originally, they were taken into one of the side buildings. All the windows are blown out. I can't even make out the name of the building. That became their triage area on site, but they've since taken them away. There was real enthusiasm here and excitement when they brought those men out. People applauded. You saw grown men begin to cry. Strangers hugged. The first firefighter that I saw, they had to carry him. He was alert, but he did appear to be dead. The second firefighter, soaked in soot and sweat, he managed to walk out on his own. A slight limp, but back straight. A moment of perspective, though. When the second firefighter came out, buddies patting him on his back, he stopped for a minute to catch his breath, and he leaned against a tractor-trailer truck. I tried to make my way over to talk to him, but they took him away. I then realized that tractor-trailer truck he had been leaning against was the vehicle they were using for bodies that they found. There were a number of bodies inside that truck. And
Byron Pitts, in an emotional moment at an emotional time in Lower Manhattan, as 2 firefighters have been found alive and are out. And they come out beside a truck that has the bodies of some others. But as the word spread that 2 firefighters have been found alive in the debris, there were cheers. Those of you who have been with us heard those cheers in the background, cheers of absolute sheer relief and joy of those who have been working so hard to search for anyone who might be alive. And the spirit now in this section of Lower Manhattan, as the word spreads, is dig harder, dig faster, dig deeper. Because these firemen are saying to one another, some of our brothers may still be in there alive. We've just seen 2 of them walk out in at least a minor miracle in Lower Manhattan. It's 12:30, just past the 12:30 mark in the east. And in keeping with what we've been trying to do all along, we try to bring you up to date on the most important developments in the story at the half-hour mark and at the top of the hour. So very quickly, all told, almost 500 confirmed deaths now in the attack on America. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani this morning said that there are 4,763 people missing.
I'm sorry?
In the ruins of the World Trade Center. That includes passengers on the planes. 94 bodies have actually been recovered in New York. If this 4,763 figure translates into deaths, this, along with the approximately 190 to 200 deaths at the Pentagon, that would bring a possible death toll for the attack on America to something over 5,000. That's the extrapolation. Now, extrapolations don't always turn out to be accurate. Ed?
Just to give you some perspective on this tragedy, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, 2,390 Americans were killed on that day. When the Titanic went down, 1,500 people were killed. If this is indeed 5,000 people, you can imagine the scope of this tragedy.
Absolutely. But we pride ourselves on trying to emphasize what the facts are and what we do not know. The facts are that 94 bodies have been recovered here in New York. 30 of those have been identified, and that there are 4,763 missing, and we just did the arithmetic for you. So if you play that out, it could be that the death toll will be over 5,000. We simply do not know. But that explains why Mayor Giuliani, about 24 hours ago, made a request for some 6,000 body bags for New York. For more news from the scene of where this rescue and recovery effort is underway, we go to John Frankel. John, what's happening where you are at the moment?
Well, Dan, we are still hearing some of those members and representatives of the firefighters union talk and address the media here. Again, they had only just a few minutes ago gotten word of the 2 firefighters that were pulled out alive from the wreckage, as Byron Pitts reported. And we can tell you that this has just got to be encouraging news for the fresh teams of firefighters that we see every hour or so, trucked in here, loading up their equipment, putting on their gear, and heading down towards the site in an effort to try and recover not just firefighters, but civilians as well. And as we have spoken to those firefighters over the last 24 hours, they tell you they do not give up hope. This is what they want to be doing. It's not just the New York Fire Department firefighters, but those coming from all around the Northeast, across the river from New Jersey as well, Rhode Island, everybody coming here trying for recovery, and that's the reason why, for those 2 firefighters that walked out. Dan?
John Frankel, live in Lower Manhattan. Now, we expect to see pictures of President Bush visiting the Washington Hospital Center at any moment now. The president, very visible this day. He spoke at the White House this morning. Now he's going to make a visit to the Washington Hospital Center. You recall yesterday he went over to the Defense Department and with Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld toured around, shaking hands, taking a look at the scene of destruction there. Now, the nation's skies, we emphasize, are officially now reopened to commercial air traffic, but it's going to be slow coming back. And anyone who even thinks about going to an airport should get there about 2 hours early. Here's the president at the Washington Hospital Center.
Our country's praying for each and every one there. We're praying for their families. Some of the folks could talk, and they described the horror of the incident in the moment. They talked about escaping, going through fire, and crawling through debris. That it's clear that they were fighting for their survival then, and like every patient up there, they're still fighting for their survival. And it's just a sobering moment for Laura and me, but we're, again, thank the hospital, the docs, the nurses, and of course, again, tell the families that the nation prays for those who have been injured during this unbelievable act of terror. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Let's go.
President Bush with the First Lady, Laura Bush, at Washington Hospital Center. He's been visiting some of the survivors, victims of the hijacked plane crash at the Pentagon. Let's go now to Tracy Smith, who's at St. Vincent's Hospital here in New York City. Tracy.
Hi, Dan. We just heard reports about the 2 firefighters, and we are waiting to see if they might be brought here to St. Vincent's. We're still not sure. The hospital staff says that they are ready if they do come here to treat them. Obviously, this is very good, encouraging news to families who are desperately seeking any word about their missing relatives. I'm standing here with Joe Tesey, who is looking for his sister, Mary Ellen.
Yes.
You heard the news of the firefighters.
We heard the news of the firefighters. It's very, very heartening. A cousin of mine from California just saw on a website that there is a Marie Tesey, and we're hoping that that's Mary Ellen. She was in the stairwells. Her coworkers saw her in the stairwells. Can't imagine that she didn't get out, and we've been trying frantically to find her.
Now, Joe, you know, you've had rumors before.
Yes, yes.
That you thought she was okay. You expected to see her
yes,
face.
Yes.
And it didn't happen.
Yes.
Are you prepared for this to be another letdown?
We're prepared for it to be another letdown. We're prepared to keep searching until we find news of her one way or the other. We are really concerned that she's somewhere hurt and needs us, and that we can't get to her because we don't know where she is. And that's our major concern right now, is finding her.
I know that you are extremely close to your sister.
Yes.
Do you have a gut feeling?
It's interesting. My mother is convinced that she's fine, and feels like God is telling her that she's fine. We just need to go find her. My sister Teresa and I have been wandering the city for the last couple days, and you know, it's harder to keep the hopes up when you are just wandering around looking for somebody. But you know, we're going to follow that and just try really hard to find her.
You're going to keep doing it.
We're going to keep doing it.
Your mom is driving cross country right now to get here?
Yes. My mother was at her sister's funeral in Los Angeles, and she and her sisters and my uncle are driving back to the East Coast.
All right. Have you gotten on? Are you telling people about the firefighters? What kind of is this starting? Kind of rumors of encouragement?
Yes, it is, and frankly, every bit of news is good news one way or the other. Mary Ellen is the most wonderful person I've ever known, and she's a great individual, got a great relationship with God.
Joe, we wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dan.
Tracy Smith. Ed Bradley. numbers for people who want to inquire about missing people?
Dan, there are a lot of people like him who are wandering around the city looking for missing relatives. They have established a missing person information number, 866-856-4167. The police have a number, 212-741-4626. And then the New York City number is 212-560-2730. They've also opened a victim center, which is located at the Armory, which is at Lexington Avenue and 26th Street. And they also have a website, which is www.wtcfamilies.org.
We pass that along. Thanks, Ed. We pass that along because, you know, when they're missing people, they have relatives and friends all over the country, and people want to know where they can call, and that's where they can call. Let's go back to the White House and John Roberts. John?
Well, Dan, the president has made every attempt to be very visible today. His visit to the Washington Hospital Center that you showed videotape of just a couple of minutes ago, the second time that he has spoken publicly. Earlier, it was in the Oval Office following a publicly aired telephone conversation between the president and Governor Pataki and Mayor Giuliani of New York City, in which the president announced that he will be going to New York City tomorrow to personally tour the devastation following leading a National Day of Prayer and Remembrance at the National Cathedral here in Washington. Now, we tried to bring you a little statement that the president made in the Oval Office after he was talking about the trip to New York City. He was asked by one correspondent where his thoughts and prayers were at this moment. Here's what the president said.
I'm a loving guy, and I'm also someone, however, who's got a job to do, and I intend to do it. And this is a terrible moment. But this country will not relent until we have saved ourselves and others from the terrible tragedy that came upon America.
Thank you. The president visibly upset there in the Oval Office, but we must understand that there is a tremendous burden on his shoulders, given the scope and the enormity of the attacks on America. There's no question that the president will have to respond militarily, and the response is going to have to be of some magnitude. To that end, the president has spent yesterday, this morning, and will spend this afternoon working the phones, trying, as his father did 11 years ago, to build a global coalition against terrorism and to build support for America and any military action that it might have to take. He's spoken a couple of times with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. He's spoken with Chinese President Jiang Zemin. He's spoken with our allies in Europe. And you'll remember yesterday, NATO invoked Article 5 of the NATO Charter, saying that an attack against one is an attack against all. President Bush this morning from the Oval Office saying that we have just witnessed the first war of the 21st century. There is universal approval of the statements I have made. This is talking about this being an act of war against the United States, and I'm confident there will be universal approval of the actions that this government takes. Dan?
John Roberts, we take you back down to Lower Manhattan, where there is news, and this time, not good news. Just a short while ago, 2 firefighters were found alive in the rubble. At this moment, 1 body has been found in the rubble. John Ashcroft, the Attorney General, is beginning a briefing in Washington with the FBI Director. We go live to that now.
Unspeakable violence and outrage, but also a day of heroism and sacrifice. As endangered men and women struggled to make their way out of burning, collapsing buildings, firemen and policemen, emergency rescue personnel struggled to make their way in to those structures. Many, and we don't know how many yet, never made it out of the buildings. Even as we continue to hold out hope that more of these brave Americans will be found alive, it is my duty as Attorney General to begin to process the provision of relief to the families of public safety officers who sacrificed so that others might survive the attacks of September the 11th. The Public Safety Officers Benefits Act of 1976 provides for approximately $150,000 in benefits to the families of law enforcement officers, firemen, emergency response squad members, ambulance crew members who are killed in the line of duty. This morning, the President of the United States, President George W. Bush, directed me immediately to implement procedures to streamline application processes and approval processes of claims for benefits under this Act. Pursuant to the President's directive, the Department of Justice this morning has taken the following actions to expedite the delivery of benefits to public safety officers' families. First, the existing regulations under the Public Safety Officers Benefits Act requires that officers' families and employing agencies fill out individual forms certifying that the officer was killed in the line of duty and that no disqualifying circumstances were present, and that the officer was in fact related to the family members seeking the benefits. These regulations direct the Bureau of Justice Assistance in the Justice Department to give substantial weight to evidence presented by federal, state, and local agencies and to resolve in favor of payment any reasonable doubt concerning the circumstances of the officer's permanent disability or death. In view of the unprecedented loss of life and the debilitating injuries to public safety officers, I have directed, pursuant to the President's request, that this process be streamlined in this case. I am directing the Office of Justice Programs to exercise the full scope of its direction and its discretion under the statute and regulations to accept applications, consider evidence justifying claims, and to process prompt payment of benefits. In cases in which benefits are sought by survivors of officers killed in the line of duty on September 11, I am directing that blanket certifications from executives of public safety agencies be considered as evidence of eligibility without requiring further individualized documentation. In addition, the family claim form will be abbreviated and streamlined. Secondly, the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs is immediately making available additional resources to see that the claims of fallen officers' families are processed as quickly as possible. Staff are being brought to New York from a variety of other settings to assist in case processing. Second, a separate computer database is being established to expedite and monitor the case processing. Third, lawyers from the Office of Justice Programs are immediately reviewing all cases from New York to make sure that those cases move as quickly as possible. Office of Justice Programs, fourth, staff members are being sent to New York to assist with family contacts and the assembly of claim packages, including the gathering of pertinent records. The Office of Justice Program representatives will be available on site, if requested, to pre-certify claim packages in terms of the completeness of those packages. These representatives will also work with the Treasury Department to expedite the payments to families once claims are approved. The provision of benefits is an insufficient but a necessary response on behalf of the American people to the unknown number of individuals who fought fires, law enforcement officers, and medical rescue personnel who died answering the call of their fellow citizens on September the 11th. It is President Bush's and my hope that the actions that we have taken today will provide a measure of relief to the husbands and wives and children that have been left behind. I know that it is the nation's hope that this assistance will stand as a gesture of the inexpressible gratitude that so many Americans feel, as well as a small tribute to the honor of the sacrifice of those who were willing to lose their lives so that others might be saved. Additionally, today I announced with the Treasury Department a step that has been taken to provide additional security at airports across the country. As airports reopen and as travel is resumed, there will be substantially increased security presence on the ground at designated security checkpoints throughout the country. The Departments of Justice and Treasury have deployed hundreds of U.S. Marshals, individuals from the U.S. Marshal Service, U.S. Border Patrol, and U.S. Customs officials as part of a broad effort by federal law enforcement authorities to provide a larger police presence at airports in addition to the heightened security procedures already put into effect. We will take all precautions necessary to protect American travelers. Finally, our nation calls on us in times like this to be at our best. If we are to prevail in difficult times like this, we must be at our best. Since Tuesday, the Justice Department has received reports of violence and threats of violence against Arab Americans and other Americans of Middle Eastern and South Asian descent. We must not descend to the level of those who perpetrated Tuesday's violence by targeting individuals based on race, religion, or national origin. Such reports of violence and threats are in direct opposition to the very principles and laws for which the United States of America stands, and such reports of violence and threats of violence will not be tolerated. I now have a few updates with regard to the ongoing investigation. Legal attachés of the FBI around the world are receiving enormous cooperation from law enforcement authorities in the host countries that are cooperating with us to assist us in following up on leads. We have also received numerous offers of help from other countries if we need those elements of assistance, and we are grateful for the assistance that has been offered and the assistance that has been rendered. With regard to federal law enforcement personnel casualties, there is an FBI agent assigned to the New York field office who remains missing. 3 U.S. Marshals who are assigned to the Southern District of New York sustained minor injuries. We are also in the process of collecting information nationwide regarding the loss of life and casualties among law enforcement personnel. As of this morning, the FBI's Leads hotline has received 2,055 phone calls. Some of these leads have been helpful to the investigation. The website, which was opened virtually immediately after the crisis, has received more than 22,700 suggested tips. The FBI is working thousands and thousands of leads. As of this moment, none of the black boxes has been recovered yet. However, we believe retrieval of the black box at the Somerset County location is the most feasible in the short term. Last but not least, the total number of hijackers, to our best estimate and our best knowledge given the information at this time, on the 4 planes that crashed was at least 18, unless contradicted by evidence which we wouldn't anticipate. 2 planes had 5 hijackers and 2 other planes had 4 hijackers each. The director of the FBI, Mr. Mueller, is here with me, and we would be pleased to respond to your questions.
All the hijackers, were they ticketed passengers? And if not, do you know how they got on the planes?
Yes, they were ticketed passengers.
Are you convinced, based on the evidence in Florida and Boston and elsewhere, that Biden was or may have been behind this?
I'm not prepared to identify or to comment on persons ultimately responsible at this time.
How many people at this point are detained around the country, and why are these potential accomplices, Mr. Director, of such concern to the Bureau?
Well, I can't give you a specific number. What has happened, as I indicated yesterday, that we're, as a result of following up leads, we're interviewing a number of people. And in the course of doing those interviews, we find that a number of the individuals, when asked for identification and the like, are out of status. And when we find somebody out of status...
This is CBS News coverage, continuing coverage of the attack on America.
That is the policy and procedures we're following.
And they're concerned to you regarding the investigation?
Some may be concerned to us, and some may not after we interview them.
What sort of indication do you have of other operations being aborted, other plane hijackings, or perhaps other terrorist operations?
You are watching and listening to CBS News continuing coverage of the attack on America. This is a live news conference with the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI. We continue with it live.
I missed...
Any determination about where the plane crashed in Somerset County, what its target might have been, and what happened to cause that plane to crash where it did?
I think it's fair to say that we're unable to comment on that.
How many associates are you looking at? How many hijackers and associates do you have?
Well, obviously, I've just announced that there are 18 hijackers. The number of associates is significant, but I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to try and attach a specific number. We are continuing to develop an understanding of all the associates that these individuals had.
Some associates are in the country.
Sir?
Do you believe the associates are in the country, or do you have evidence that they
First of all, if we knew exactly where associates were, it would make our work easier. But
Attorney General Ashcroft and the Director of the FBI, Mr. Mueller, will continue answering questions now at the tail end of their briefing. Basically, the Attorney General, the news of it was saying that so far as can be determined, there were a total of 18 actual hijackers. Other people were in support roles, just how many not yet clear. Secretary of State Colin Powell is appearing in public. Let's pick that up live.
Determination and its readiness to take all necessary steps to respond to the September 11th attacks in accordance with the UN Charter. By that language, it gives us the ability, and any nation the ability, to put forward on the agenda for Security Council deliberation any other issues related to this attack that we might want the Security Council to take up. I'm very pleased also with the response of the European Union, with all of the other international organizations who have come forward and responded in one way or another. The President has been on the phone constantly, as have I, talking to leaders around the world, and we are getting a solid expression not only of condolences and support, but of action. They want to work with us, not only in this specific case of what happened on the 11th of September, but in response to the general recognition that terrorism is a crime against all civilization. Terrorism is a crime against all humanity. It knows no ethnic, religious, or other national or geographic boundaries, and we must see it in that context, and that's why we are calling it a war. I have also been on the phone within the last 2 hours with Prime Minister Sharon and Chairman Arafat, and with Foreign Minister Shimon Peres of Israel, trying to move forward the process of a ceasefire in the region, trying to begin those meetings that we have been talking about, which would lead to implementation of the Mitchell Plan. I'm still hopeful that something can be done in the next several days to have that first meeting, and we will be in close touch with the leaders as the next days unfold. In addition to the United Nations Security Council resolution, I mentioned the General Assembly has passed its resolution 56-1. We will be having a meeting with the Russians in the near future when Mr. Armitage, Deputy Secretary Armitage, travels to Moscow next week, and Mr. Bouster will give you an announcement on that a little later for the U.S.-Russian Working Group meeting on Afghanistan. We have been in very close touch with the Pakistani government. Deputy Secretary Armitage met with Pakistani representatives again this morning, and I expect to speak with President Musharraf in the very near future, in the next several hours, if I'm able to reach him, to discuss the situation and exchange views on the situation in the region. Our embassies are all hard at work. There have been some closures, and they go down and come back up in response to threat conditions. But our plan is to be actively engaged around the world and not let this heightened sense of tension affect our ability to do our job. And so we are encouraging all of our ambassadors to do smart things, to take all necessary safety precautions, and to make sure their security is intact, but at the same time to continue doing America's business throughout the world.
Secretary of State Colin Powell. Now you have two of the main rails of the story just in the last few minutes. Actually three. One, two firefighters found alive in the debris here in New York. Two, Attorney General Ashcroft briefing at the Justice Department along with the director of the FBI saying there were 18 hijackers, 5 each on 2 planes, 4 each on 2 other planes. A significant number of associates helped on the ground, he said. And then we took you to Colin Powell live talking about the continuing efforts to pull together a worldwide coalition for what the Secretary of State again has called a war on terrorism. President Bush, earlier in the day, clearly emotional, saying that he felt tremendous compassion for the families of those who've suffered loss, tremendous admiration for those who are continuing with the rescue and recovery efforts, but then with a almost clenched teeth saying, I have a job to do. That job being to calibrate what response there will be from the United States. And it's clear that around the world, in his telephone calls, President Bush's telephone calls to world leaders, Secretary Colin Powell, basically it's in the spirit of, listen, we're going after these dastardly people who did these deeds. We hope you will be with us. We want you to be with us. We need you to be with us, but make no mistake. We're going after them, whether we have you or not. And here's the time for you to tell us, are you with us or not? That's basically the spirit of what's going on with the President, with Secretary Colin Powell, and with American diplomats worldwide. Now, it's 1 in the afternoon here in the East, and it has been an hour for miracles at the site of the demolished World Trade Center towers in lower Manhattan. Rescuers have pulled 2 firefighters out of the rubble alive more than 2 days after the towers collapsed into hundreds of thousands of tons of rubble. At the White House, President Bush vowed the U.S. will lead the world to victory in the war against terrorists. He'll come to New York tomorrow, which he designated a National Day of Prayer and Remembrance. Before leaving the Capitol, the President will attend prayer services at Washington's National Cathedral. Mr. Bush said he weeps and mourns with America. There's word now from a congressman that the hijacked plane which hit the Pentagon actually circled the Capitol first and then flew towards the White House before it hit the Pentagon. Now, here's more of what we know at this hour. Briefly, we're trying to keep you up to date on the latest information. A Deputy Defense Secretary says the United States will conduct a sustained military response to the attacks. He didn't say when. America's skies were officially reopened to commercial airline flights about 2 hours ago, but planes may fly only if airlines impose very tight new security. If you're going anywhere near an airport, you think you can get a flight, think you have a flight, best advice is forget it for the time being, but if you're determined to go, you should get there at least 2 hours before the scheduled departure time. At the World Trade Center site, 4,763 people are listed as missing. That includes those on board the 2 skyjacked planes which hit the World Trade Centers. But only 94 bodies have been officially found. The realization is sinking in that some of the bodies may never be found because of the heat of the blast caused by air fuel at some of the high floors in the building. At the Pentagon, the estimated death toll is 190. That includes the 64 people on the plane which hit the building, and no professional football this weekend. The NFL has canceled all games. Now, that brings you up to date on the situation at this hour. There is news developing as I speak, so for that we go to National Security Correspondent David Martin. David.
Dan, there's been a rather extraordinary press conference here given by the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Paul Wolfowitz, and he said that the $20 billion emergency supplemental request for the current fiscal year that the White House is sending to Congress as a result of these attacks, most of that money, or much of that money, is going to go to the military, and he says that is just a down payment on what will be a program to, in his words, bring the military to the highest state of preparedness for this war against terrorism that lies ahead. And then he went on to describe in the most specific terms yet what this war of terrorism against terrorism is going to encompass. And he said, this is not just a matter of a dramatic airstrike. This is not just a matter of arresting some terrorists. This is a matter of denying them sanctuaries and ending states, those were his words, ending states that support terrorism. Now, if the U.S. Military follows through on that, that truly is, I think, in anybody's fair estimation, a war, although he also made the point this is not just a task for the armed services. This requires diplomacy, which we're seeing right now, by the way, in this concentrated approach to Pakistan to be a major source of support for whatever the U.S. Might want to do against the Taliban rulers of Afghanistan. And one interesting point here, if you take what the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Paul Wolfowitz, said about ending sanctuaries for terrorists, it really doesn't matter whether you can pin these airline attacks directly on Osama bin Laden, because past terrorist attacks, such as the bombings of the American embassies in Africa, have been directly pinned on Osama bin Laden. So I would think if you just put what's been said on the public record here, that the U.S. is proceeding down a path which is going to force the Taliban rulers of Afghanistan either to give up Osama bin Laden, deny him shelter in Afghanistan, and do away with his training bases, or else they are going to be at risk of losing their assets to a military strike. Now, people say, well, what can you possibly destroy of any value in a country as dysfunctional as Afghanistan? Well, the fact is, the rulers of Afghanistan are in a civil war with another group vying for control of that country, and if the U.S. military were to destroy whatever military forces the Taliban has, that would probably end the rule of the Taliban. So the Taliban has a lot at stake here, and the U.S. is clearly going to be trying to get Pakistan to allow such things as overflights and perhaps even basing of U.S. military aircraft and even troops there in Pakistan as a threat to this one known sanctuary, Afghanistan.
David Martin at the Pentagon. And David, I'm going to ask you to repeat, I mean, that was an extraordinary news conference. Repeat what you believe to be the most significant two lines out of that, I can only say, most significant and extraordinary news conference.
Well, to put it as succinctly as possible, $20 billion is just a down payment on building the U.S. military up until it is ready to fight and continue to fight this war, which will not be a matter of a few airstrikes, which will not be a matter of arresting a few wanted terrorists, but will be a matter of denying terrorist sanctuaries.
That from an official Pentagon briefing and news conference a short while ago. Now, CBS's veteran foreign correspondent Alan Pizzi is in Islamabad, Pakistan. He has been there for some little while. Keep in mind that Pakistan is right up against Afghanistan. Its fairly new president, President Musharraf, has been trying to walk a fine line between the Taliban and Western powers, including the United States. And against that backdrop, Alan Pizzi reports to us. Alan?
Dan, good evening. Well, as you say, there has been a fine line, and it looks this evening like General Musharraf has stepped across the line, definitely into the Washington camp. He's been on television twice already to talk about the events in New York and Washington, deploring it, offering sympathy, and also saying that his regime would cooperate. Now, you have to understand that the Taliban would not exist without Pakistan. It was created in the Afghan refugee camps along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Pakistan has helped arm the Taliban. They certainly give them a lot of support. The Pakistani intelligence service is deeply entrenched in Afghanistan, and Pakistan can squeeze the Taliban. We were talking to a strategic analyst today who said that they can not only help find Osama bin Laden, but Pakistan can force the Taliban to do something, because the Taliban is surrounded by unfriendly neighbors. Pakistan is their friendly one. All the main routes in and out for any kind of trade, food, medicine, fuel, everything runs in, the bulk of it, through Pakistan. If the Pakistanis choose to turn that off, they can do so, and that's a big card in their favor. Now, what can they do to help America? They can do plenty. They can, as David said, allow bases. That's a bit of a difficult problem because they have, of course, an internal problem. This is a Muslim country. Muslim fundamentalism is very close to the surface here, and there could be a backlash in the streets if they go too far against the Taliban, but they can definitely squeeze them, and it looks definitely like that's what they're going to do. This is a country that's desperately seeking friends. They want the United States as their friend, and what the U.S. can do to squeeze Pakistan is two things. Firstly, there are sanctions in place which have been imposed by Washington 10 years ago, and more were put on when Pakistan got into the nuclear arms business a couple of years ago and did a nuclear test. The Pakistanis, want those sanctions lifted. It's not like things are being denied to come in here, particularly that they need, but as long as the U.S. places them under sanctions, big-time investment and big-time aid is not going to come in here, and Pakistan desperately needs investment and aid. And the other weapon the U.S. has, which we understand they have applied, is they've gone to the Pakistanis and say, look, if you're not on our side, you're against us, and if you're against us, guess where we're going? We're going to jump right into bed, be big friends, bigger friends than we are already with India. Pakistan is desperately afraid of India. India outguns them, outpopulates them. They have an ongoing issue over a place called Kashmir. They've had a couple of wars. Pakistan does not want the United States in the Indian camp at their expense. So there's plenty that Washington can do, and it looks very much like the Pakistanis have gone over to the Washington side. A government official gave an impromptu press conference here in the hotel where we are tonight and said that everything is open for discussion. He said that the Pakistanis have not been asked for any specific help from the Americans, but whatever is deemed necessary will certainly be discussed, and he implied that cooperation was going to be the watchword from this part of the world, Dan.
Alan, you mentioned that the Pakistan government under new President Musharraf can squeeze the Taliban. Created what I think is an accurate picture. The United States squeezes Pakistan and says, the government there, you're either with us or you're against us. They squeeze the Pakistan government, and as you said, the Pakistan government can squeeze the Taliban, but the Taliban can squeeze the Pakistan government. And my question is there or is there not concern among Western diplomats in Pakistan that this situation within Pakistan now could become quite explosive as the top throws in with the U.S.? The street feels a strong affinity for the Taliban, particularly in northern Pakistan where you are. And if this situation, while as we just talk about it or you lay it out in a news story, may seem fairly easy, we squeeze the Pakistan government, they squeeze the Taliban, there can be a lot of squeezing come back the other way.
Yeah, I think this is something that has to be treated with a lot of diplomatic caution. This can't be done bull in a china shop fashion. Washington is going to have to understand the Pakistanis' concerns. They're going to have to voice their requests and their demands in a very diplomatic way, which I'm sure they will. The Pakistanis are going to have to respond, perhaps not as overtly enthusiastically as America would like, but I think the cooperation is going to be there. I think, remember, the military does have pretty good control here. The streets aren't going to erupt that badly at this stage, but it is a definite concern, and I think that everybody's going to have to remember that there's more than one agenda being played out here, and this is a place for serious diplomacy. If progress is going to be made, it's going to have to be done diplomatically in order to have it done, the real work done militarily. This is a delicate situation, but not one that can't be handled, because there seems to be a great degree of understanding and a great desire on the part of both sides to get on with this job. This is not a situation that Pakistan wants. They want bin Laden out of their hair probably as much as anybody else does. So I think that with caution and attention and no strident demands, I think they can probably work through this, Dan.
Alan Pizzi, up live in Islamabad in northern Pakistan. In the background here, keep in mind the following facts. Both India and Pakistan, they do not like one another. India and Pakistan are both now nuclear powers. In recent weeks and months, we're trying to get a map up for you there and had a little bit of trouble with the videotape. But India and Pakistan don't like one another. In recent weeks and months under the new Bush administration, the Pakistan government began to feel that the new Bush administration was moving, oscillating toward more support for India. Through the Cold War, the U.S. generally leaned toward Pakistan because India leaned a little bit toward the Soviet Union. Is this complicated? Yes. Is it part of the very important context in which the United States is trying to put together a worldwide coalition for a big-time military operation somewhere down the road? Absolutely. One has to understand that the plates underneath the geopolitical earth are shifting with the events in the United States of America this week. Our relationship with India, Pakistan, keep in mind you have Afghanistan, then some territories, Pakistan right below it. Pakistan has a lot of influence in Afghanistan. Afghanistan and its population has a lot of influence in Pakistan, particularly in the northern part. And then off to the west, in the easternmost part of China, and many people don't know this, China has a very large Muslim population in the eastern part of China. All of this is by way of saying that if you haven't looked at the map of this part of the world, the so-called subcontinent of Asia, might be a handy time to do it sometime over the next few days because increasingly it's going to be in the news. Now, CBS News chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer has been monitoring developments in Washington. Bob?
Well, Dan, I would just first underline everything you have just said. This is extremely complicated, and there's no question about it that the United States in recent months has been sending out new signals to India that we want to reinforce and sort of reestablish the ties we had with the Indian government. But let me follow on just a little bit to what David Martin was talking about Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, saying the $20 billion appropriation that they're asking for is just a down payment. The fact is, there's something else extraordinary going on. The House and Senate later today, now they're still deep into the details of this, but are going to pass that $20 billion appropriation. This, of course, is a staggering sum of money, and that the Congress could come together and pass something like this in a matter of days. They may not get it done by the 5 o'clock this afternoon, but they'll get it done tonight or tomorrow. Both sides are saying they're going to do it. They are going to do this. What's happening right now is that they're trying to work out exactly who gets what sum of money, and that's no small task when you're talking about $20 billion. But Mr. Gebhardt, the leader of the Democrats in the House, told us earlier today they're going to get it done. Republicans are confident they can get it done. That means that sometime tonight or maybe tomorrow, they're going to pass a $20 billion appropriation. There's a very strong feeling here to support the president in every way possible. One example of the way the sides have come together, normally on Tuesdays, Dan, each party in the Senate has what they call their party caucus. They all get together and have lunch. Republicans in one room, Democrats in another room. Today, a rather extraordinary event. Republicans and Democrats in the Senate are getting together for one lunch to talk about, among other things, how to get this appropriation passed. Now, the second thing they're doing, many of us missed this morning when the president said, I hope the Congress will give me a strong resolution of support. Many of us thought that what he was talking about was the resolution supporting him that passed both houses yesterday. What he is talking about, Dan, is a resolution from the Congress to authorize him to use military force should it become necessary. Now, Mr. Gebhardt said earlier this morning he doesn't think the president needs any kind of congressional resolution on that, but he says he'll go along with it. And the ranking Republican on the Armed Services Committee over here in the Senate, Senator Warner, tells us that they are working on that, and he assures us that he thinks that indeed will pass.
Bob Schieffer, Senator Joe Biden of Delaware has just very recently, with the shift in power in the Senate, become head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Yes.
succeeding Jesse Helms, who went into the minority. My question is, where has Biden been in this, whether we should weight our influence, rearrange it toward India, or stick a little more with Pakistan? Do you know how he has felt about that?
I'll tell you, yes, Senator Biden, I think, supports the opening to India. Now, how he comes down on Pakistan, that is a more complicated question, and I just have to check with him to see where he is on that. But I think, Dan, Senator Biden yesterday said one of the smartest things that's been said up here all week. He said, and he is one of the first people to say, that we need to form this broad coalition that the administration is now doing of allies around the world. He says this cannot be America against terrorism. This must be the civilized people of the world against terrorism. So he has been strongly supportive of the president on this. Senator Biden is going to play a key role in all this, I should tell you.
Well, exactly the reason I wanted to mention it. All of this in the background as the United States begins trying to piece together a coalition and moves toward what David Martin reports will eventually be a large-scale military operation against terrorism. We go now to Lee Cowan in downtown Manhattan, who has some interesting guests. Lee?
Well, Dan, we've been talking about the two firefighters that have been rescued that Byron Pitts first reported. With me is Peter Gorman, Captain Peter Gorman. He's the president of the Uniformed Fire Officers Association. These are precisely the kind of moments that really keeps hope alive out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Unfortunately, we lost audio for the moment. We'll pick that up with Lee Cowan as soon as possible. Ed Bradley, we said it before, let's say it again. These are times where moments to smile or have even just a little jolt of joy are so few. This finding of these two New York City firefighters in debris gave us one of those moments, gave everybody. It's just lifted spirits. One doesn't want to overstate it, but just a small thing has lifted spirits quite a bit.
It has lifted spirits, and I think this is what keeps these guys working down there, the hope that, I mean, they realize whether this is more of a recovery operation, but they do have the hope that if they keep digging and if they do keep working, that maybe they will find somebody else, just as they did this morning with the two firemen. But I think the reality is they know it's a recovery operation. The hope is that they will have an occasional rescue.
And it was a good point made this morning. Certainly the firefighters deserve all the praise, all the admiration and support that we can give them, as do the police. But the firefighters themselves mentioned that steel workers, iron workers, construction workers of all kinds have, with very little notice, been doing a tremendous job in pulling this rubble apart to get to those few people who will still be alive, and there may be more alive in there.
And they're not just people from New York. I mean, they're people who've come from many states around New York, great distances, to volunteer their services for no pay to try to help down there.
And with the steel, iron, and construction workers, you know, their fathers built these buildings. They now are helping to clean up the debris after the buildings are wrecked, and they and their sons will rebuild these buildings.
There was an architect who was interviewed last night. I remember him saying that we are builders, and now we have to become rebuilders.
Well, it may be, and no one wants to get preachy about it, worth noting that around the world, one of the characteristics of 20th and 21st century Americans, almost by consensus worldwide, is we are builders. Build big dams, big buildings, built a new civilization out of the wilderness. In the post-technological age, we begin to think of ourselves a little more as, you know, information revolution people. However, we do have a strong base in this country of people who know how to build things.
Well, we did. We built a new communication system. I mean, the whole sense of how we communicate today with computers. The telecommunication system that we have built primarily in this country, but that is spread around the world, is an indication of what Americans are capable of. And I think that we have to not only rebuild sections of this city, but we have to rebuild confidence, we have to rebuild position, we have to rebuild political alliances. And I think that what you were talking about with Pizzi and with Bob Schieffer, looking at the subcontinent, with India, with Pakistan, there are shifting alliances there. and we're going to have to rebuild and find new allies there.
Well, we didn't mention the Iranians and putting together the geography of the region. You have Afghanistan, Pakistan to the south, Iran to the west. We haven't heard much about the Iranians, but we'll begin to hear a lot more in the succeeding days because the pressure will be on them. Are they going to be with us or against us in this new war against terrorism? CBS News coverage of the attack on America will continue.